Hi, welcome to Motorcycle Ways. So here I am with my Honda CB500X and I'm just going to look at the rear brakes to see what condition they're in. I'm going to check off the pads and check off the caliper and see that everything is in working order and the pads are in good condition, and check the brake disc and see what condition that's in. So this is the procedure you'd follow if you were changing your brake pads on the rear of the Honda CB500X, or if you were just checking the caliper to see that it was in working order and what condition your brake disc and all that was in. So let's get started. So here's just a few tools I put together for the job. We have an 8mm spanner, 12mm spanner and a 14mm spanner, and the equivalent there in sockets as well, whichever is handier to use, and just a flat screwdriver, and it's just a tin of manual brake cleaner there. That's about all you need really for this job. So here is our brake caliper, our rear brake caliper, and you can see here is the pin that holds in the pads. So if you were just changing your brake pads, you could just stick out this pin, 8mm bolt, loosen him out, and when you get him out, you'd have to loosen this bolt here, the 12mm bolt, and that bolt comes loose. You can lift up your caliper enough that your brake pads will come out here on top, and replace them with new pads and put back your two bolts and torque them up, and that'll be job done. But today we're going to do a bit more and take out the caliper. So let's see how we go. So I'm just going to start with break the lock of the 8mm here on top. Use a spanner here if it's easier than the sockets. The exhaust is quite close, so the spanners will probably work out better. If you have a ratchet spanner, better again. And this is a 12mm bolt here. That's where you loosen out. Then at the back here, there's a 14mm. Might get that handier with the socket. A small ratchet. And yep, there we have them. Now a thing to do here maybe before loosening any more is going to push back your pistons before you take out the caliper. It might be easier. The best way to do that is get the screwdriver maybe just over the disc and under the pin, and just wedge it to one side like that, and you can see it pushing back the pistons there. It should go back freely. That tells us our pistons are working. So just over your disc like that, and wedge it that way, sideways, and that way you're not damaging your brake disc. I don't recommend going in sideways like this against your brake disc, because you could warp the disc or even crack it, and you don't want that. It'll cause you more trouble. So in on top like that is the best way of pushing them back. Now that we have that done, we can loosen all the bolts out. That's one bolt out there. That's the 14mm. And this is the 12. It slips out there. Then we're just left with the pin here holding in the pads. So slide that out now. You can see there's a bit of corrosion on that, so that'll need cleaning down, and a bit of brake cleaner and clean it down, and we'll grease it before we put it back in, because that's the pads slide over and back on that, so it's important to have it free. And you can see there then, you lift it up, you get your brake pads out like that. We'll take a look at them now on the bench and see what condition they're in. We give the caliper a clean down there as well. So we'll have a look at that in a minute. First of all, we'll take our pads to the bench and have a look at them. So here we have our brake pads, and we can see that they're in pretty good condition. There's a good lining left on them. So I'd hope to get a good few 1,000 kilometers out of them yet. You can see a groove in the middle there that tells you that there's plenty left on the lining. So the important thing to look at when you take out your brake pads is how they're worn. Are they worn evenly down, or are they worn on one side? So you check your line across like that and see that they're even. And the same from this side to that side too, that they're worn even. If they were worn on one side more than the other, it indicate there was a problem with a piston seizing, or maybe sliders not working, or something seized up. So it's important to check that when you take out your pads, that the old pads have worn down evenly. Tell you that your braking system is working okay. And these pads are, you can see they came from the factory. They're genuine Nissan ones. So they're in it from new. They are what you call a semi-centered pad. There are really three different types of brake pads. You have organic, semi-centered, or you have centered. Now the centered are probably the most expensive brake pads because they're the most hard wearing. There's harder material in them, so they'll last longer, and they'll probably give a better braking performance and better in wet conditions or mucky conditions and that. But they do have their disadvantages too, like they are more expensive and they will probably wear down your brake discs faster than other pads, organic pads or that, because they're harder and more severe. But then at the other end of the spectrum, you have organic pads that are cheaper and softer material in them. So you will have to replace them more often. You won't get the same mileage out of them. And you probably won't get as good a brake pedal. There'll be a softer feel to the brake lever and pedal and that. So then in between you have these, which are called semi-centered. And they're sort of middle of the road, so to speak. So they won't be as severe on your brake discs as the centered pads, but will last longer than the organic pads, and their price range in between somewhere. So they're probably good enough for most bikes, adventure bikes or road bikes or that. The centered pads are probably best for racing bikes and bikes that get up to high temperatures with the brakes and that. So these are okay to go back in again, so I'll be just cleaning them down and putting them back in again. So let's have a look at the caliper and get it cleaned. So here we can see in the caliper we have a little bit of a clip here that will pop out. You get a screwdriver behind it and pop it out. There we have it. So just take note of the way it comes out so you know how it goes back in again. There's no harm to take that out and clean it, because your brake pads are sitting up against that, and a cleaning will do no harm there. And you can see here we have another one sitting here on the holder. It'll pop off as well, and we can give that a clean too, because your pads are sitting against it, and stop any noise, and a small little tab of grease there each side won't do any harm. So I'm just going to pump the brake lever here nice and easy, just to bring out the piston a small bit. I can see it coming out there, just to see or condition it's in. There, now we don't want to bring it out too far, get air in the system or we'll be in bother. So we can see there is a small bit of corrosion on it there, roundabout, and a bit of debris and stuff that needs to be cleaned up. So I'm going to clean that up before I put it back in. So as their pads wear down, the more exposed this piston will be. So it's time to clean it up and keep it in good condition. So I'm just going to use some brake cleaner here. Give that a spray out brake cleaner. And I'm using a very fine sandpaper here. It's 1000 grit. So just so it doesn't scratch or mark the piston. It's just good enough to take off any bits of corrosion or any bits of debris that's on that piston. So clean it up like that. So we can see how that has cleaned up nicely there now. That caliper looks good. Piston has a bit of a shine on it. Took the corrosion off it. So I'm just going to clean up my brake pads here and clips and that with some brake cleaner. You can use that if you're putting on back on the same pads, they're in good condition. You can use the brake cleaner to clean up the pads, and a bit of a toothbrush I have here. It's ideal. Take any dirt and dust off them before you put them back. So the last thing we have to check is our brake disc or rotor before we start putting things back together. So I'm just going to measure. I'm going to measure the width of it here and see what thickness it is. And the rear disc is slightly thicker than the front. The front is said to be 4.5 millimeters. Coming from the factory, and the rear is 5 millimeters. So a slight difference in them. So I'm just going to look at that there, and you can see that that's 3, 4. Well, that's reading 5 millimeters. So that's good. There's very little, if any, wear on that. There's no lip on it. If your disc is worn, you'll feel a slight lip along the outside edge and the inside edge. But that feels good, and it's reading 5 millimeters, so there's good thickness in that. So the only thing I'm going to do with that is clean it down with brake cleaner as well, and give it a wipe of a Scotch pad just to clean it up. And we'll do the inside of it as well, make sure, do both sides. Now, so what you want to be checking for here on your brake disc is that they're not scored along the face of the disc here. There's no heavy scores on them. you could get the scores if your brake pads wore down to the metal. So you'd have metal to metal there, which wouldn't be good. And they could score the discs, and if that happens, you would probably have to replace your discs as well, because it's no good putting on new pads on top of scored discs. You're only going to ruin the new pads, and you're not going to have any braking stopping power. So just check the face of it there and see if there's any scoring. And cracks is something else you want to look out for, if there's any cracks on the disc. But look to be in pretty good condition there now. So that's cleaned up, and we're ready to assemble everything back together again. So now we'll assemble everything back together again. We'll start by putting back on the clips and it off. Goes that way. Now the clip sits into the caliper there, like that. That's him. So now we'll start the back bolt there, the 14mm. Just before we put on him, I'm going to put a bit of grease on him there. I'm using some Mintex brake grease. So and just a bit around the bolt there, because the caliper slides in and out on that bolt, so you want it to be free. Stop any corrosion. So you just have to line that up then. So when you get a few threads on him, you can put on the brake pads next. I'm just going to put a bit of copper grease on the back of the pads here. You can see where the piston hits the pads, just where there's metal to metal contact, and stop any noise, reduce the noise, and keep everything smooth. Small bit of grease. You don't want to get grease on the contact side of the pads, or it'll cause, you'll end up with no brakes, cause more issues. Another place here you can put a bit of grease on the tip of it, here where it's sitting making contact as well, just a slight bit. Then you can slide the pad into place. Make sure it slides in there into the groove where it sits nicely. And I'll do the same with this pad here. Piston is actually hitting this one, yeah. So a bit of metal or copper grease there, and again a bit at the top where it sits in. Another small bit of grease on this bolt here, the 12mm bolt. I have to slide back and over. Keep it free. So now that one is down there actually. Then when you get a few threads in that, the pin is next for holding the pads, so that'll have to be greased as well. I have it cleaned down there, so I'll use the brake grease on that. Let the pads slide over and back on it. important. So you can line that up next and line your pads up. A small bit of a spring in the pads there when it sits against the clip, so you have to just get them in line. Try and start the thread there by hand. And the 8mm spanner, just tighten that up. Now I get the 14mm bolt here at the back. Nip that up. Then you're left with the 12mm bolt here. Nip that in. So now that's all back together there. I'm just going to get a torque spanner and torque them up to the correct torques. So now I have my torque spanner set here to 30 Newton meters or 22 foot-pounds. So I'll just torque them up to spec. That's that one. So a 12mm. That's that torqued. So that's everything back together and tightened up again. And all we need to do now is just press our brake lever here a few times to bring out our pistons against the pads again, so that you'll have a brake pedal when you go down the road. Important to do that too. And another note there, just another note there while we're looking at our brake fluid reservoir. An indication that your brake pads may be worn and in need of replacing is if your brake fluid level goes down low. If it's gone down near the lower mark or that, it could be a sign that your brake pads need to be replaced. So, and just note on when you're pushing back the pistons, if your brake fluid is low and you top it up, and then you come along to replace your brake pads and you push back your pistons, you're pushing the fluid back up, so it could overflow in that case. So you may need to release the cover of the reservoir there, just to take a bit of fluid out. If you have a syringe or something, and just take a bit of fluid out if there's excess in it. So that's just something to keep in mind. Oh, just another note. So there we have it, our rear brakes on our Honda CB500X. And if you have any questions on that, or would like to know anything, just leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.